I didn't even do anything wrong on January 6th, and look what they did to me. I got a weird Bitcoin donation. They did investigate it. Came up with nothing because it was legit. I mean, you know, once the statute of limitations runs out, I'll show you all the receipts. You know? Somebody gives me a huge crypto donation, and I literally had no contact with the guy. He sent me 2 emails. He sent me an email on my birthday. He said, hey, what's your crypto address? I sent you money for your birthday. Thanks. And it was like $3,000. Never heard from him. Then in December, he sent me an email. Hey, I sent you some crypto. And it was 13.5 Bitcoin. And he killed himself. And I didn't even know who he was. I didn't even know that story until it got reported later, a month later, when Chainalysis, which is associated with the CIA, did a whole report on it. Because they thought it was foreign funding, but it wasn't. It was legit. Some guy just gave me money, and I happened to be at Stop the Steal. It literally was wrong place, wrong time. And the feds thought it looked suspicious, and it did look suspicious, but they investigated it. They froze the funds that touched the Bitcoin that I sold, and they unfroze it 6 months later, almost to the day. Because that was, you know, whatever the procedural rule was, if you don't file a charge, you can't freeze the money indefinitely. The funds remain in the bank. They froze it. 6 months later, they didn't charge me because there was no crime, you know. And, you know, but nevertheless, people said I was in the building when I wasn't. There was that hoax where that guy with the scarf was pictured in the Baked Alaska stream. Everyone said it was me. It wasn't. That got me banned on a bunch of shit. So I literally just got caught up. I got swept up in it. That's all it was. And it totally fucked me over for years. I just got crushed. It was such a massive deal. Like January 6th, when you think about the significance of it, the seat of the government was attacked by a mob, and, you know, who knows what really happened? What were there agitators? Was there foreign funding? Who knows, you know, but it was a very grave matter. It's why they had the DOJ come after everybody. And I was just one live streamer kid who got fucking crushed in it. You know, it looked fishy. They were coming for everybody. I got swept up in it. And they declined to charge me because they found out I wasn't anywhere near the building. I did nothing wrong, but it didn't prevent that from fucking up my life. You know? And so that's why this whole thing makes me apprehensive. Because just like before, even though I'm not really doing anything wrong, I mean, you see the money that comes in. It's super chats. And we did a money bomb stream in December. They got $10 million, made $160,000 on our annual fundraiser. And I'm not saying that like I'm ungrateful, but like that's the kind of money they pour in to get 10,000 views on YouTube.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode number 9, Exit the Matrix. Can anybody hear me? Anybody say something in the comments or indicate one way or another? I just want to make sure. Stephen, I see you. Can you hear me? You could just do a thumbs up. Okay, good. All right, awesome. All right, well, thank you for joining for episode 9. I wanted to start with that clip that somebody sent me last night from Nick Fuentes. And regardless of whether you like Nick or not, it isn't really the point. The reason that I wanted to play that clip is to highlight a very important point, which is that Bitcoin is not private and Bitcoin is not fungible. So he talked about his experience where, in essence, his Bitcoin was tracked by Chainalysis using through the CIA. They found which Bitcoin belonged to him, and they were able to confiscate that Bitcoin, and he never got it back. He's lost millions of dollars. He's been debanked on 5 different occasions. He's never been charged with a crime. So I wanted to start with that because that's an important point, and it's it's something that a conclusion I've come to really over the last, I don't know, since May or June, which is that if we're going to stop the continued surveillance and enhanced tyranny of central bank digital currencies, we already have a central bank digital currency, then we're not going to do it with open public ledgers that can be tracked by the government and by multiple authorities. And so I'm going to be sharing more clips like this just to make people aware that this is a real situation and a real threat. So anyway, I thought I'd open with that. The point of today's show, though, is I wanted to talk about our upcoming workshop that we have in New Jersey on October the 5th. And I encourage you now, and we'll be talking about this throughout the night, to go to bit.ly/NJCBDC. Today is the early bird pricing discount. So if you are able to hop in today, that I'll show that link, and I actually already posted the link as well in the comments. But at midnight tonight Eastern time, that the pricing goes up $15. So I wanted to make sure everybody was fully aware of that. And we'll be talking tonight about what's in the workshop, and then joined by some of the folks that are helping to organize this event in New Jersey, so that you can understand more about how we even put together these events, so that if you're interested in hosting one in your city, you can learn a little bit more about how that works as well. So before we jump into that, I'm going to just do a little update from last week. So last week's episode 8 was 50 Shades of CBDC Tyranny. This was based on an article that I just wrote for the Brownstone Institute that was picked up by Zero Hedge, and I'll talk a little bit. I went in detail last week about the article itself, but I'll talk a little bit about some of the updates and the after effects of that, because I think it's created a bit of a stir. And so you can actually see that. I don't know if you can see this on your screen. bit.ly /The Aaron Day Show. If you go to that URL, that will take you to my webpage, and then you can actually from there go to all the different locations that this podcast is on: Rumble, YouTube, X, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. Before we get into the New Jersey event, just as an update, I will be speaking next week at the Peak Prosperity Annual Summit here in New Hampshire. So that's going to be a weekend-long event. I'm going to be doing a 2-hour workshop, just the aspects of the workshop that are focused on kind of the hands-on. So I'll be onboarding people to crypto and gold, and teaching people how to use these alternative assets. We have the Bitcoin Cash Argentina conference coming up October the 12th through the 14th. I'll be in Mexico City from Mineratopia. We're very much looking forward to that event. There are going to be many different privacy-related projects there, including the folks from Xano and Monero and other projects. So it's going to be a great opportunity, I think, to actually have some very serious conversations about how we discuss the issue of privacy, how we make privacy great again, because it's become very apparent to me that a lot of people don't value privacy, or in particularly young people don't even know that it's something to consider. So we need to work on that, particularly in light of how fast the surveillance state is ramping up. I'll also be speaking at the Brownstone Institute event in early November. I think these tickets are already sold out, but there may be 1 or 2 left. That's going to be in Pittsburgh. Very much looking forward to that. That's going to be all the folks from the Brownstone Institute covering the lockdown issues and mandates and censorship industrial complex. And of course, we'll be talking about economic issues like CBDCs. This is another new event that was just added. I'll be speaking at the People's Reset in Mexico, January the 29th through February the 2nd. So this looks like a terrific event. It's really focused on, all of the different ways in which you can exit and build. And so it seems like it's a very hands-on approach to practical solutions for basically doing the opposite of Klaus Schwab's Great Reset. I believe tickets just went on sale for that, and there's early bird pricing for that as well. So I put the link for that in the comments. So for tonight, we're going to be talking about the New Jersey event, which is October the 5th. I think we might even be switching that out. It's actually going to go from 12 to 5 total, but the main program is from 1 to 5. At the Bordentown Elks. And we'll get back to that. There are a couple of other events. We've just scheduled the Omaha workshop, which is November the 9th, Creighton University. So looking forward to that event. That's going to be a large auditorium that I think can seat 500. And then before I get into that, it looks like we are going to do Nashville on December the 14th. So we're going to finalize the venue for that shortly, and so I will publish the Eventbrite and the early bird pricing for that. But it does look like December the 14th. So we're trying to plan at least 6 of these out in advance, and I think I'm going to target doing one a month. I think that's about the right amount. Anything more than that is a little bit too straining, because I am also speaking at all these other events. So we're going to try to map that out as far in advance as we can. So once again, this from last week, which the purpose of last week's podcast was really to go over this article, 50 Shades of Central Bank Digital Tyranny. And I won't go through it all now, but the key points were that as I've researched this, what I found is that we really already have a central bank digital currency. And we need to reframe how we even look at this. This isn't about preventing something. This is about acknowledging that we already have a central bank digital currency and preventing it from becoming more tyrannical. And again, the article goes into a lot of detail, but what I will explain, and these are new visuals that I didn't have last week. In essence, I've created a tyranny index where you can look at, so our money is digital. So the way money is created is the government issues an IOU to the Federal Reserve, and then the Federal Reserve creates money out of thin air in an Oracle database. That is literally the basis of how technically our money is created. And today it is already programmable. It is already highly surveilled, but there are different things that can be added to it. More surveillance, more control mechanisms. You can make it cashless or not cashless. You don't have to have a cashless situation in order to have a CBDC. It can coexist, as our current system does, alongside cash. It could be tokenized. Our current system isn't tokenized. It uses Oracle and Microsoft centralized databases, but there is no rule that says a CBDC has to be tokenized. The issuer, this is kind of the debating point. Do you just have an account with the central bank, or do you also work with commercial banks? Those are options on a continuum of CBDC tyranny. Is your currency globalized, or is it specific to your country? And how is crypto treated? What are the regulations like? So those are the components of an index. And so in short, what I'm saying is we're already at a 45 out of 200. We already have surveillance and monitoring. We already have various control mechanisms. I mean, if you look at a health savings account or an FSA, which uses the existing bank structure, they can determine whether or not you can, buy healthcare related products, whether you can buy it at Walgreens or at CVS, even the types of medication. So all of that is programmable using the existing digital currency that we already have. And it's issued in a way right now where you have a central bank creating digital currency and then writing checks off of their Federal Reserve account. And then individuals then deposit those checks into commercial banks, and then they create their own database using Microsoft or Oracle. So, it might be, you could say we have a commercial bank digital currency backed by a central bank digital currency. That might be slightly more accurate, but nevertheless, I think it's a difference without a distinction. I mean, at the end of the day, we have digital programmable money that starts with the central bank. And make no mistake about it, Republicans will try to tell you that they're anti-CBDC and that they make this a political issue. They both have plans for increasing the tyranny index. There is no solution. So Cynthia Loomis, who is the senator from Wyoming, who spoke at the Bitcoin conference about building this Bitcoin strategic reserve, she is anti-privacy. She's anti-privacy coins. She has been very much for only transparent ledgers and increasing reporting across the board and increasing control over crypto and giving that control to the commercial banks. That is, again, elevating the tyranny level of our existing central bank digital currency system. And the Democrats are more about giving control to the central banks. But at the end of the day, once you dig into and you read that article and you see how the NSA, the IRS, and multiple other federal government departments are already analyzing all of our transactions, whether or not they're analyzing, your Citibank account or whether they are going to the central bank doesn't matter. They already have all of the reporting in place. And so I think we're allowing these politicians to more narrowly define what a CBDC is, which is a deflection from the fact that we already have a CBDC, from the fact that they're already tracking everything that we're doing. And that's part of why I played the Nick Fuentes thing at the beginning, because they, in addition to what they did to his Bitcoin, he's been kicked out of 5 bank accounts. He can't get credit card processing. This is the existing system. So we don't need to be worried about what's going to happen in the future. We need to be aware of what's happening in the present. And so I want that to become more a part of what I'm talking about, and is actually going to be part of these workshops. The ultimate goal of this, and you have to understand that the whole point of CBDCs is to push a technocratic agenda, to push a one world government agenda where elites pick scientists and engineers to make decisions for people and to monitor and track through penalties and incentives what people's behavior. And at the end, a global digital currency is actually going to be tied to energy credits. This is essentially where they're going. So the ultimate form of CBDC tyranny is one where everything is surveilled using AI. There's one essential financial institution issuing the actual digital currency. The currency itself is backed by energy credits. It's all tokenized. It's cashless. Complete control and complete banning and regulation of, well, not even regulation, just banning of crypto, all on a one government system. So that is kind of the maximum end of things, but you have to understand that is what they are moving towards. So, so I thought I'd give this, these are updates from last week. I didn't have these visuals made, but I want to add one other very important point, because a lot of times I will meet with people and they'll say, yeah, but I use cash. We do cash Fridays. We think that it's important that you use cash. And a couple things about that. One, only 8% of the money supply is actually in cash. 92% of it is already digital. But one way you can look at cash is it's just a paper form of tokenized database entries. So it's just basically a piece of paper that refers to an Oracle database entry. That's essentially what it is. And to be very clear, they are continuing to add more surveillance to cash, whether it's RFID tags, nano tags, fluorescent markers, color shifting ink, microprinting. They're already tracking serial numbers. They have cash recycling machines that can actually sort through this. So part of my exploration, as I've been focused on this CBDC issue, is to really take a look at what's happening with the actual technical development of all of this. What are they doing with our existing system as it relates to what people are trying to define as CBDCs? And the conclusion I came up with is we should be horrified about the current state of affairs, and we should be aware of these things. Things like, oh, I'm just going to use cash, doesn't change the fact that we're still dealing with money that is created out of thin air by the government, backed by nothing, and created in a database with this middleman called the Federal Reserve. So whether you're using a paper note or an online bank account doesn't change the underlying Ponzi and destabilized nature of that as a form of money. So with that said, as a quick update, I want to walk into a bit before I have some of the other folks join about what the content is in these workshops and how I came to this. I won't go through all the backstory, but I've been involved with crypto since 2012. I was a political activist for a while, which I exited to focus on how you could use the blockchain technology behind Bitcoin to go into other areas besides money and get rid of third parties. So money represents 5% of global assets, but it's real estate, art, collectibles, every other asset that you can imagine that makes up that other 95%. And every category of commerce that we deal with, we're dealing with centralized databases. And those centralized databases have their own regulators and middlemen around them. And so the idea behind blockchain technology is you can use this decentralized technology to get rid of all of the middlemen so that people could engage in trade directly, and without having all of the technical hacking and fraud that you have with centralized databases, which this is a multi-trillion-dollar problem every year. I think, a couple of weeks ago, it was Social Security numbers, the credit agencies, there's hacks all of the time with these centralized databases. And so I think the idea was that blockchain could help fix that in multiple areas. And so I exited politics, and then after COVID tyranny, I noticed that many of my friends were being targeted, either arrested by the federal government or having their businesses destroyed that were in crypto. And and these are people that are very much pro-freedom, anti-violence, completely the most pro peace and love people that you could imagine, and they were the ones being targeted. So now that I was living off of crypto at this point, I exited the fiat dollar in 2019. I was like, well, why are they going after all of these people? And that's why in my research I found this idea that now all of a sudden since 2020 we've gone from 35 countries researching CBDCs to 134 countries representing 98% of the global GDP are actually very seriously at various phases. Over half of those are actually at kind of the pilot and development and rollout stage. 11 countries have rolled out a CBDC. And so once I realized that the crackdown on crypto was really related to closing off the competition. And by the way, I would reframe it now. Based on the article, what I would say is we've had a CBDC. They're looking to enhance the tyranny, and part of enhancing the tyranny is making sure that there are no options. So people like to talk about Gresham's law and a lot of these things related to money, but no one's ever dealt with a situation where you had this amount of surveillance and this amount of control over the issuance and use of money. I think it throws a lot of the economic theory and a lot of the monetary theory out the door. And so once I saw this threat, I'm like, wow, I need to warn people. So I got back into politics. I ran for president solely to raise awareness on this issue. I wrote this book, The Final Countdown. And the point of the book, which is part of the workshop, is the first half of the book is explaining what CBDCs are, why government, or actually more, I even go into who's kind of behind this, why there is a push for technocracy and why there is a push for digital currency that can be programmed, tracked, and controlled. And I explain in the book how fiat currency always fails. The dollar is no exception. Every fiat currency in human history has failed. Even those that were global reserve currencies have failed. And I explained why and how, but it's very predictable. And the dollar is flashing bright red on all of the reasons that happens. And so anyway, the book, first part of the book is theory. The back half of the book is practice, to teach people how to download a crypto wallet and how to buy gold and Goldbacks and silver and how to start using those on a day-to-day basis. And what I found is that a lot of people were buying the book and reading the book, and they were coming up to me and they were saying, listen, I'm terrified. I didn't realize this. It was kind of like the experience that I had when I was researching this and found out how, severe and how well-funded and well-organized this is. But people were having a struggle taking the first step. They were having a struggle downloading a crypto wallet, figuring out how to buy crypto. I mean, there are 20,000 cryptos. Which ones do you buy? How do you use these things? Even with gold. And I think this is true a lot with boomers. There's most people don't have physical custody of gold. Most people don't have physical custody of anything. We use third parties. You buy a gold ETF. You don't have physical possession of gold, which means actually that you don't own that either. And so I decided to put together these workshops to not only explain things, but to actually in-person, hands-on, walk people through so that they walk out of the workshop with self-custody alternative assets that they can use on a day-to-day basis. And so this is kind of the overview. I'm probably going to be changing even this around quite a bit in the next month because I've had to completely redo the presentation. I'm actually redoing a significant portion of the book just based on some of the things that I've learned in the last 4 months. But I go through and talk about what a global technocracy looks like, what one world government looks like based on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and with a global payment system backed by energy credits. I give an update on the state of the surveillance state today and how, it's already bad. People just aren't aware of it. As an example, our pictures in the United States are taken 100 times a day, not including whatever we post on social media through surveillance cameras. They're adding anywhere from, depending upon the study, 10,000 to 100,000 surveillance cameras per day in the United States. We are very quickly rivaling China with respect to the amount of surveillance that's going on. You'll learn about who's behind the CBDCs and technocracy, so who they are, and at least my theory for their motivation. This isn't tinfoil hat stuff. I give kind of a practical, giving them the benefit of the doubt. And that their intentions are good, the outcome is still bad. So I kind of walk through it from that scenario. I talk about the global state of CBDCs, as I said, the demise of the dollar. I talk about something called the Great Taking, which is something that basically since 1994, there have been changes that have been made at the state level to laws that essentially make it so that in the next financial collapse, your stocks, bonds, 401ks will be basically taken over by the 4 largest banks in the United States through bankruptcy. They basically changed the laws so that you don't even own your own stocks in the event of a financial collapse. And this is important, and it's related to CBDCs because they are working towards a process of tokenizing your stocks and bonds and other assets in the same way they're adding more enhanced programming and tracking to the digital money system that we already have. So these things are interrelated. Then I walk through cryptocurrency at a high level, and to be clear, it's the 99% of crypto that gives the other 1% a bad name. I kind of walk through at a very high level what the theory behind the cryptocurrency is, and then get very quickly to the handful of options that are actually viable to be used as peer-to-peer cash as an alternative to CBDCs. I give a little bit of an overview of gold and silver, and then we get into, so that's like the first half, and then there's a break. And in the back half, it's, we set up wallets. I give you a couple different cryptocurrencies for the event coming up in New Jersey. Everybody's going to get some Monero and some Zano. Those are both privacy tokens. And Zano allows you to actually create privacy tokens in addition to being a privacy coin itself. So big focus and a big change for me in the last 90 days is that a complete focus on the necessity of privacy. I walked through how to use gold and silver for day-to-day commerce. I've actually been using, in addition, so remember, I don't live on fiat, so I actually will explain what I do. I use Goldbacks in addition to crypto, in addition to tokenized gold, and I kind of explain how you can do all of that. So this isn't about how to invest in crypto. This is about how to obtain crypto and to start using it for day-to-day transactions. Because in the end now, and again, my worldview on this has changed. This isn't about preventing CBDCs. We already have CBDCs. This is just about getting these alternatives adopted before they eliminate our ability to use these alternatives, and before enough people have alternative currencies and enough merchants have the ability to accept these alternative assets. We need to get that done kind of on an emergency basis, because we know, and it's very clear, what's going on politically and kind of on an overarching basis with respect to this move towards a global technocracy. So, again, as I mentioned, the attendees will get an autographed copy of my book, in addition to a couple of different kinds of crypto, Goldbacks, hands-on experience, and then I'll explain how to actually pay bills and to get the ball rolling. So when you come out of this, you really should have a firm understanding of, okay, yes, the situation is bad. And I will admit, the first half is kind of like, you're going to have a, wow, I didn't realize it was that bad kind of moment. And you won't be able to unlearn the stuff from the first half. And then once you realize how bad that is, then you're going to be very eager to figure out ways to get around that. And so you will walk away empowered and at least able to have taken the first step on the way towards using these alternatives. So, and the whole point about this is to build a movement. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. A lot of times I talk to people and they say, well, they immediately start thinking about their friends and family, and they go to this mode of, oh, well, normies will never accept anything like this, or I can't imagine, Aunt Hilda using this, or some kind of scenario like that. And what I like to say is that, the way that you roll out something like this is like how all ideas come about, or technologies, or even how startups work. There's an adoption curve. You don't go to mass market right away. You start out with innovators, people that already understand the situation. And there are many that already understand. There are many categories of businesses that have been already destroyed by the government through Operation Choke Point. I mean, I've got a list of 24 different categories of businesses that can't get access to banking services. There are related areas. There are health freedom, food freedom, school choice. There are a whole variety of different alliance partners, groups that have related values, that understand that once money becomes more programmable, it makes their cause and their issue impossible to actually advocate for. So we're just trying to get those innovators now. And I'm going to put this slide up often in these podcasts to remind people that we need to be hyper focused on innovators. This isn't about getting this message to, NBC or MSNBC or to the mainstream. Right now, we need to aggregate people that are that already are aware of what's going on, and also who want to work on building a solution. Because if we build tools that are easier to use and better from a product standpoint than CBDCs, then when they try to roll out the next level of tyranny in an emergency, we can actually offer people something that's better and easier to use. But it's going to be the innovators that are going to have to work through that. And we're going to have to work together on an accelerated basis to kind of piece that together. So with that said, I'm about to bring people up, but I want to say that these workshops wouldn't be possible without partners. This is actually a huge part of how this works. And so in essence, people have indicated that they're interested in these workshops through the daylightfreedom.org website. And so based on where there's geographic interest, we then we form a group. We have actually signal groups based on, locations. And so we work with partners on the ground who are involved with various organizations that are ideologically aligned with this. And they help with everything from finding a venue to finding hotels for people that might be coming in from out of town, to finding other groups that want to market the event. We provide discounts to affiliates who actually help promote the event. We provide discounts to all of their members. And so this is really what makes all this happen, because I'm just here. It's me and my wife and a friend of mine doing all of this. And, we've got a couple dozen events over the next year, and literally we wouldn't be able to do any of this on our own at all. It's all because of these partners. So I'll mention a few of them. Zano is a partner. We have Punk Rock Libertarians podcast, Cake Wallet. And by the way, Cake Wallet. So I use Cake Wallet. So these aren't people that are like, oh, I want to pay you to change what you're doing. These are things that I was already using, and then they're sponsoring because they actually support my message, which is incredibly helpful. By the way, I'm running this through a nonprofit, so it's a 501c3. And so this is not a money-making enterprise for me. We're reinvesting everything to get the word out. And I just wanted to figure out how to get this message in front of as many people as quickly as possible. The Mises Caucus, the Libertarian Party of New Jersey, Bucks County Libertarian Party, New Jersey Libertarian Party, Liberty Speaks, Waretown Stamp and Coin Shop, Libertarian Party of Delaware. These are our main sponsors, and there are more people sponsoring. You don't have to put up money if you actually just want to actually help promote the event. We're taking more sponsors, and usually the way this works is somebody emerges as kind of a lead. So Dan O'Neill has been the focal point for all of this. And if you don't know Dan, I hope you get to meet him at some point. He's just been a rock star at putting this together and bringing some of these groups in, as are some of the other people that you'll meet on this podcast. And so this is really how this works. This is a completely organic grassroots initiative to put these workshops together. And if you go to daylightfreedom.org, you'll see there's a Zero Hedge. One of the attendees actually did a write-up about it. And so people have walked away from this with a very positive experience, primarily because it's accomplished what my goal is, which is it's empowered people. I don't want to just spread doom. If you know anything about my background, I'm more of an action-oriented person than a talking about something person. So I've been a serial entrepreneur, and I tend to move towards the activism side. The last thing I want to do is just frighten people. I'm much more interested in empowering people. And that is, at least so far, what we're hearing is the feedback from these things. And so to talk about some of the specifics, again, I encourage you, in fact, I might pull this up right now. And one other thing I'm going to do is, well, hold on one second. Let's see. So it's bit.ly, bit.ly /NJ CBDC. So if you want to check this out yourself, let me share out screen. So this is what the website looks like. Again, the event is Saturday, October the 5th. We have early bird discount tickets, $75. That closes today at midnight. So if you want to take advantage of that, I highly recommend you visit the site today. It's in Bordentown at the Elks Club. And so that's the basics of it. And so you can learn more. This is kind of a recap of everything that I've said so far in this podcast. And so that is, that's that. And then we have also, there is a block code for discounted hotel rates. So we have access to Holiday Inn Express, which this is a substantially reduced rate. Hotels are very expensive. I can tell you when we started doing our research on this, I think that the code is probably CBDC. It might be CBD, but I'll bring on Dan to discuss that. So at this point, that's the basic overview. I'm going to let some of the other folks jump in so we can just have kind of a casual conversation about this and and answer anybody's questions that they might have about this event or how to plan others. So with that said, I think I see Dan O'Neill is in, Stephen Honeywell is in, Rob is still muted. But with that said, so Dan, any thoughts you want to share?
Well, it's going to be a good venue. We got the Bordentown Elks. It holds about 300. We got some tables in the back, and there'll be plenty of parking. Afterwards, we have the Country Diner actually has like a big banquet room, a bar. They're going to give us the whole place afterwards. So if anyone wants to get together, they got any more questions, they want to hang out, it'll be a good time afterwards. But the event itself is going to be we're hoping to get a really good showing. And New Jersey Stands Up is one of the biggest medical freedom groups in New Jersey, and they're helping us organize it with Hillary Jersey. She's doing a great job. And we got a lot of organizations in the area. And in fact, the Amish might actually be interested in joining us with this too. So,
wow, that's awesome. That's great. Well, I know there's a lot of food freedom related issues. I know the Amish have been completely under attack, so they're more than familiar with what's going on. I suspect they might be more interested in the Goldback aspect of this. And I do want to state, this isn't just about crypto. This is about alternative assets. It's about crypto, gold, and silver. I know some people express concerns about that. In fact, I see a comment here I've been reading about from Janet. Hi, Janet. I've been reading about crypto. First line said digital currency, not for nothing. It's only run by a computer. So if some major hacker was to jump in, I mean, that's a good point, except that the existing system that we have today is digital. Our existing financial system is primarily digital, and it actually runs on centralized databases. It runs on a type of database that is very subject to hacking. One of the inventions behind Bitcoin, which I'm not going to go into, I don't recommend BTC, and I'll go into that in greater detail. But the idea behind it is, it's actually a distributed database where the transactions can't be changed or reversed. It creates what's called an immutable ledger. So it's actually a fundamental improvement to the decentralization and security of information and how data is stored. So you have to understand that the existing system is already digital, and the existing system is already highly at risk of being hacked. The question is, when you start talking about cryptos, which technology, and that's something I've spent 12 years, and that's an ongoing educational exercise to figure out which ones are the right ones. And there is always there is always risk. So in any event.
So you were mentioning Goldbacks before. When I went to PorkFest this year, I was using those things very often. I was even able to negotiate with some of the vendors. I love those things. They're pretty neat. I love the artwork on them too. They're very durable. You can keep them in your wallet for like 2 years, and they stay really well.
Yeah, so let me explain what this is. And if you're not familiar with Goldbacks, what I'm holding in my hand is this is 1/1000th of an ounce of gold. So this is about $5 worth of gold. And you can't see them very well, but they have beautiful, beautiful artwork. In fact, one of the biggest complaints is people say that they don't want to spend them because they are like artwork. But I use these in New Hampshire. New Hampshire has an official location here. There are 150 businesses in New Hampshire that already take Goldbacks, and wherever I go, if I'm not using crypto or some kind of debit, I actually have a debit card tied to Goldbacks. I can actually move gold and Goldbacks to a debit card, but I always tip people with Goldbacks with an explanation, and people love it and they get it. I'm sure the Amish, anybody. This is the great thing about doing these workshops is when you're in front of 100, 200 people plus at the same time, and you're trying to introduce these concepts, you learn a lot about, one, how not user-friendly crypto has been, which is a good source of information to make things better, because that is what's going to be necessary, is building better, easier to use tools. But you also learn that everybody understands a Goldback. There's no technical knowledge or expertise required for Goldback. So I think that, again, the solution to this, once you understand that they've been working on these digital currencies for a long time. In fact, the United States, for their, again, I'm going to have to get used to the terminology, their enhanced CBDC, it's been a project out of MIT, funded by the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, that actually has some Bitcoin developers working on it. So this is not a government project where you're like, oh, it's like, the Obamacare website, it's not going to work. You actually have the most well-funded banks funding the best technical talent. And so it's important to look at what they're doing, because they are making the surveillance and tyranny easy to use. And so if we're going to provide alternative assets in the form of crypto, gold, silver, whatever it turns out to be, it has to be as easy to use. And if we're not laser focused on that, it's not going to be successful.
So as far as usability goes, did you have any recommendations on wallets that in the future that are going to be a little bit easier to use than the ones in the past?
Yeah, so I mean, I've used probably over a dozen different wallets, and right now what I like is Cake Wallet, and I will tell you what my criteria are. And when you go to the Daylight Freedom website, what you'll see is I've announced this DEF CON 1 Manhattan project. And the point is to either build or buy or partner with somebody that has a point of sale system for merchants and a wallet for users. And the requirement for the wallet for users is it has to be able to take multiple cryptocurrencies, because if there's a big emergency and they try to roll something out, some new enhanced digital currency, we need to be able to onboard a lot of people, and a lot of these crypto projects don't have the ability to handle very many transactions per second. So you're going to need a multiple coin approach. And as I've mentioned before, I'm focused now on privacy coins. And so Cake Wallet works with multiple privacy coins. It works with Monero. In fact, I think it was originally designed for Monero. And they're adding Zano and Zano tokens. So this, to me, it's actually the only wallet that does that as kind of a minimum criteria. But on top of that, it's easy to use. And here's what you can do within the wallet. And I'll do a separate, well, it's part of the workshop, but I'll also, over the next several weeks in these podcasts, I'll start introducing some of these ideas. It's not that I'm going to conceal what the solution is unless you go to the workshop. I want to get the information out in as many ways as possible. But when you're using the Cake Wallet, you can actually buy gift cards from right within the wallet. So I just took my kids, last weekend to see a movie, and I used some Monero, and I bought an AMC gift card and bought the movie tickets, and then went in and bought the concessions right out of the Cake wallet using the gift. So you can buy any number of gift certificates. I mean, you could buy gift certificates to sandals. You can buy airline tickets. This is not, by the way, the end goal of this. The end goal is we need to be able to use crypto directly with merchants, but as an interim step, the ability to use gift cards and debit cards is an important part of the process. And so I'm fortunate. I'm in New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project. We've been way ahead of the curve on adopting this. So there are places that I can go and buy. I can buy meat. I can buy organic milk. I can buy any of a number of different things for the last 10 years directly using crypto. Most chances are, if you're not in New Hampshire, that's probably not available to you. So while we're in the process of trying to build out tools for merchants and point of sale systems to make it easier, gift cards and debit cards become a viable interim solution. So you can actually buy a debit card and use a debit card. So you're able to basically operate without a bank account using crypto through a variety of different mechanisms. And all of this is available within the Cake wallet. So that is what I'm recommending for right now. I'm going to be putting something on the website where I update and explain to people what I use, what the criteria are, and then other tools that fit the criteria, but maybe I'm not using them, just so that there's an understanding. But also, it's important to note with all of this, once I get that link up in the next week or so, this changes. And so I've been living on crypto exclusively since 2019. And because of the regulations, because of what's going on with the crackdown on various projects, what kind of my experience is like living in a video game, trying to pay bills and figure out what I'm doing from time to time. And that's not like that's not a workable solution for the long run, which is why I'm now at the point where I'm working with wallets and working with point of sale systems to make it easier for merchants and consumers, so that you don't have to replicate my experience, because I enjoy this kind of thing to a certain degree, but that's not going to work for mass adoption.
So with the privacy aspect, I heard you mention Monero and Zano. Now, Bitcoin is kind of like a surveillance coin. They can track it, and if there's anything that they didn't like about it, they can actually confiscate it or track who has it. So could you actually take your Bitcoin, buy Monero with an atomic swap, and then buy your Bitcoin again if you wanted to? And then that's a good way to clear it from having any... this is the way they're using blockchain analysis to track down like Ross Ulbricht, Julian Assange, or is that how they're doing it?
That's how they're doing it, and this is why I played the video at the intro with Nick Fuentes. There are a lot of people that I know that have been tracked or are going to be tracked. They're probably, if they're not worried about it, they should be, because clearly they've demonstrated an ability to do this. I mean, Ian Freeman, who, my wife and I were at his sentencing hearing. He's in federal prison for 8 years. They used chain analysis. They used chain analysis to get Ross Ulbricht. They used Roger Ver is in Spain right now, and I can only assume that. They're going after him for alleged, frankly, bullshit from 10 years ago. He left the country, renounced his citizenship, and now they're using chain analysis and some other techniques to try to claim some story about something that happened 10 years ago. And there's an important point about this. So it can be tracked, but these exchanges where people buy crypto, like Coinbase and others, Coinbase is working with the IRS using AI to monitor people's transactions. So eventually, I'm surprised I haven't had it happen yet. Some Bitcoin maxi will climb in and say, well, yes, you can keep your Bitcoin secure if you do A, B, C, D, E, and F. But here's the thing. You shouldn't have to have 140 IQ and 15 years of programming experience to use money. If money isn't easy to use, and if it isn't privacy by default, it fails. So we can't give somebody some Rube Goldberg design for how they can keep their money private. And by the way, even if that's the case, most people will fail. The people that are sitting in prison right now are some of the smartest people and some of the earliest adopters. And so this idea that but your point, there are some things that you can do. One of the reasons so I've really become fascinated by Zano in the last, since May. And the reason is Roger told me to take a look at it. Roger Ver told me to take a look at it. And if you don't know who Roger is, I first learned about Bitcoin from Roger and Ian Friedman. But Roger gave a talk at a Free State Project event called the Liberty Forum in 2012. And I can tell you some huge people were onboarded to Bitcoin from that same talk. It was very electrifying. And I played the clip all of the time. And Roger talks about, if you want to stop all the violence around the world and the wars and all the stuff from the central bankers, and you want to empower people to be able to, all over the world, to be able to engage in trade, that's what Bitcoin was about when he talked about that in 2012. And it turns out Bitcoin has been hijacked. Roger wrote a book about it. In fact, if you're going to buy a book right now, don't buy mine. Buy Roger's book, Hijacking Bitcoin. He released this book in April describing how the original vision of Bitcoin, which is to be cash that people can use to buy and sell things, has been hijacked. And now it's this digital gold surveillance system. And it turns out that the same people that have kind of hobbled Bitcoin funded all of the United States CBDC projects. And there are even developers that worked on Bitcoin that are working on CBDC projects. So Roger, after releasing this book, found himself arrested in Spain. I don't find these are related events. This information that Roger has in this book they want suppressed, because what Roger's saying is we still need peer-to-peer digital cash. In fact, we have more of a need now because Bitcoin was hijacked. Bitcoin was the lifeline after the financial crisis in 2008. That's when Bitcoin was launched, was after the central banks and everybody screwed everything up in 2008. So this was our solution. This was our way out. But now the central bankers and the technocrats took a look at this and said, hey, this is a threat to us. So why don't we hijack and cripple this thing while developing a form of digital currency that is the exact opposite, something that can be centrally controlled, something that can be programmed. So Roger's out raising the alarm signals on this. And just 3 weeks after starting doing interviews, he did an interview on my podcast and did a handful of others. And then he was shut down and thrown into the same prison John McAfee was thrown into. And so Roger's the one who told me about this. And so to understand, Roger got involved with Bitcoin when it was under $1. Roger onboarded, he was the first merchant to take Bitcoin. He was the first investor in Bitcoin related companies. He onboarded, there wouldn't be a Bitcoin. Bitcoin wouldn't be where it's at today if it weren't for Roger. And Roger has invested in dozens of other projects. And the theme of what he invests in are projects that push the idea of voluntary exchange and people being able to engage in commerce freely. This is what motivates him. And so when he said to me, take a look at Zano, I'm like, okay, well, you've been right. You've been right in the past. So I'm certainly going to take a look. And then I started reading the white paper, and I'm like, wow, this is, so not only is it private money that you can use that can't be tracked by third parties, but you can tokenize other assets and trade those with the same level of privacy. So, and again, this is part of what's in the workshop, but not only are they looking to elevate how much they can program and track the existing digital dollar, they want to take our stocks, our bonds, our mortgages, all of our assets and put it on one common platform that can be tracked in the same way. So to me, Zano is the antidote to that. So now we can actually trade our own assets without third parties, privately and confidentially. So it addresses all of the global assets, not just the 5% that represents money. So that's, I don't want to make this all about Zano, but I actually haven't been as excited about a possible solution to, well, at this point, I was excited about Bitcoin because my previous startups ran into issues with Fiat, with banks, with credit card processing, with the government, unrelated even to me. I was just collateral damage. And so Bitcoin was already kind of a revolution. But now that Bitcoin's been hijacked and they're building these surveillance CBDCs, which, by the way, they're connecting globally. They're actually developing platforms for all of the CBDCs to be able to interoperate. Now privacy coins and privacy tokens are not a nice to have. They're an absolute necessity if you want to preserve free will. So I have a passion for this that is more elevated than even my enthusiasm was for Bitcoin in 2012.
So if they do gold and silver confiscations again, you can basically sell your gold and silver, put it in the blockchain, keep your Monero. They have no idea what you have. You can cross a border, whatever territory you need to get to, rebuy your land, rebuy your guns, your gold, your silver, and you're ready to go again. Or you can choose to fight it out. If you want to do that too, it's just a good option that you have in your tool belt, right?
Well, yeah, my opinion is that we need to exit. I mean, I don't think these technocrats are going to win. I think they might wipe out humanity in the process of trying to implement their vision. I think that's probably the biggest risk. Like, I don't think what they're doing will ultimately be successful, no more than communism has ever been successful or these types of things have been in the past. But certainly many, many people, perhaps generations, get wiped out in the process. But to me, one of the issues that we have is, well, you say a privacy coin, and then some people will say, oh, well, this is just about money laundering and drugs and terrorism. And I think one thing that is in that article that I just wrote, what you have to understand is they're going after gun groups. They're going after religious groups. They're going after people based on political speech. They're going after the Amish. God forbid you sell raw milk. So everybody listening to this isn't about activities that you do today that you consider normal to be a part of your life will become dark market activities based on what the plans are and what they've actually been doing. And I have a long list of categories of merchants that have been denied banking services, and it's increasing by the day. And you see this with the health freedom community. You saw this with Dr. Joseph Mercola. You see this constantly. I talked to Mike Adams, the health ranger. I was on his show. He's been denied banking services on multiple occasions, struggles today to get credit card processors. I think most of the people that I know, most of my friends have been debanked. None of these people are criminal. None of these people are engaging in the activities that people like to lump into, oh, you're bad, and privacy is bad because if you have not, what was it, George W. Bush, he said, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to worry about, or whatever that statement was. And I'm actually writing an article right now about privacy. Privacy, I've always viewed as a right. To me, it was like the idea that people don't value privacy is bizarre to me. But I saw this Cato poll that showed that 33% of Gen Z were okay with the federal government putting surveillance cameras in people's homes to monitor for domestic violence. What that said to me was there was a wake-up call to me to say, okay, what my understanding was of the Constitution or even natural law or whatever is now not like this is being challenged in a material way. So we need to make privacy great again, and we need to actually articulate this in a way so that people understand this isn't a fringe darknet thing. Everything that we do, from banning books to not being able to buy gas stoves, all of this is related to money and programmable central bank digital currencies.
So it can get to the point where you're going to go buy gas for your car, and your central bank digital currency won't work if you didn't get your vaccine, or you won't be able to buy ammunition because you might have said something the wrong way on Facebook. Or is there a carbon credit score that might be coming? If you use too much carbon during the day, you might not be able to use your money anymore.
Yes, that's a great point. And in fact, I am trying to think if I'm going to pull up a different set of slides. I think I had them last week. Let me see if that's actually the case. So the whole point of technocracy is to completely change. I didn't include it. Shoot. All right. Well, I will tell you this. Look up Doconomy, D-O-C-O. I'll put it in the comments. D-O-C-O N-O-M-Y, MasterCard. Google that. They have the whole point of technocracy is to flip the economy from being a price-based system to being a energy credit-based system. This idea started in the 1930s, and they have been building it while we have not been paying attention. MasterCard has already worked with Deconomy and the United Nations to build a credit card that tracks your carbon usage and shuts off when you use too much carbon. This exists in the marketplace today. This project was started in 2019. So, because there's some aspect of this, if I say to you, oh, well, they're trying to build this, you're like, oh, that's a tinfoil hat. Then when I show you MasterCard's partner page and you see the 150 companies that they're already working with, everybody from airlines to hotels to BMW and others, where they're already tracking this information. You've probably noticed if you bought an airline ticket recently, it will tell you how much carbon you're using. They've been building this infrastructure. So understand, we don't need a technological upgrade. Today, using the existing banking system, the digital banking system that we have, it is possible to program it in such a way that you can track energy usage and shut off access to use of money based on energy credits. That exists. Yep. Hey, Stephen, I see you there.
Hi, Aaron. I couldn't help but think as you were talking about this, the trucker protests in Canada, where they were using PayPal and Venmo to fund these truckers so they could continue their efforts, and they tracked it back to their bank accounts. Anybody who donated and froze their bank accounts.
Yep.
Do you recall that? Would you like to elaborate on that a little bit? How much do you know about that?
I know a little bit about it, and I know the Canadian government was able to intervene with that directly, and were able to shut off access to banking services very easily and very quickly. And so, one of the things is, so people in the U.S. are aware of this, and then they'll say, well, that was Canada, without realizing what's going on in the United States. What's going on with, and again, when I say this, I'm not endorsing what these people have to say, but Kanye West had $100 million frozen at Chase Bank. Nick Fuentes, whether you like what he has to say or not, he's never been charged with a crime. They've seized millions of dollars. He struggles to get a bank account. Mike Adams, the health ranger, can't get a bank. I mean, I don't even know how many bank accounts he's lost. I mean, literally, when he interviewed me, he was dealing with issues related to finding yet another credit card processor and trying to figure out how to use crypto. These are people that are in the alternative health community, which just so happens they've turned out to be right, and people are now aware of that. That hasn't made their access to banking services any easier. Gun groups, gun stores, gun rights groups struggle constantly to get access to financial services. And so this already happens today. It was called Operation Choke Point, where they did a concerted effort to shut down the banking services of categories vape, if you're in vaping, if you're in, whatever, even tobacco activities that are actually legal. These companies still struggle to get access to banking services. That exists today. Cryptocurrency exchanges. Just today, there was a bank in Texas, or maybe it was yesterday, that they're going after for alleged money laundering. So they use these know your customer anti-money laundering laws to make it almost now impossible to get a bank account, and very easy to lose a bank account. I did an analysis of the top 4 banks, JP Morgan Chase, Citi, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo. I looked at the terms and conditions. They can cancel your bank account without cause. They can change the terms and conditions without your involvement. They can and do share or sell your information to third parties, and they can change fees without your consent. That is the default. That is the existing banking system. And you add on to that this great taking where they've changed the laws in all of the states. I want you to think about this as just one example. Let's think about, so everybody thinks that their 401k is their great retirement plan. And I'm not going to go into all the details about 401ks now, but when you own a 401k, you own a basket of stocks, right? So you may own pieces of 100 different companies. And so you may notice, you may have seen some of these memes where they talk about how, Vanguard and State Street and BlackRock own everything. Well, they don't actually own everything. They're voting all of our shares. So it's our money that we put into their funds, their 401ks and their financial instruments, but we give away our voting rights. Because as a shareholder, if you own pieces of 100 different companies, you should be getting notified to vote your shares. You should be getting 100 notices every, quarter at a minimum, or well, maybe not every quarter, maybe an annual shareholder meeting, but whatever. A couple times a year, you should be getting notices. But you know what? You don't give notices because you gave it away contractually to your broker. And so now your broker, and now BlackRock and Vanguard, they vote your shares. They already vote your shares. And because of these other changes in law, when there's a financial collapse and there's a bankruptcy, the secured creditor of the broker ends up owning all of the stocks and bonds. So your 401ks, you don't vote already, and then you don't own them. And so that's just one more example of, and I like to say, the money in your bank account is not yours. The stocks and bonds that you think that you own through your broker is not yours. And this is by design, because when they say you will own nothing and be happy, they actually have a very specific plan for that. And if you go to the Brownstone Institute, I wrote an article called "You May Own Nothing Sooner Than You Think." It's a very long article, but I explain exactly how this works technically, from the fact that we sign 150 to 400 click wrap agreements every year. So, you get a new piece of software. You sign up for Amazon. I think Amazon's agreement is like 12,000 words. You sign up for iTunes or whatever, all these different contracts. If you actually read every word of these click wrap agreements that we just click the terms and conditions and move on, it would take you 1 hour every day, 365 days a year, just to read the contracts. Well, nobody does that. I don't do that. I probably sign 1,000 contracts a day. And I even know better because I used to sell to HR. So to get out of cutaway legal, I actually moved to click wrap agreements. It actually reduced our sales cycle from 18 months to 6 months. So, I know it works, but at the same time, we've given away our rights. We've given away our information. We've given away our privacy. And now we have to figure out how to take that back. So the future is going to be digital. And we're either going to have tokenized money and tokenized assets that is controlled by the likes of Klaus Schwab and these types of organizations. That's how we will own nothing to be happy. Or we can reclaim the ownership of our assets and start trading them with self-custody. That's what I'm obviously advocating for. But once you realize what they've actually built in terms of the change in contracts and change in law, you'll be horrified. People do not want to hear. And David Webb wrote the book, The Great Taking. And there's a YouTube video on it as well. I've met David. I've actually worked with some of his team he's worked with a couple different groups to get changes made at the state level across the country to reverse some of these changes. Take a look at it. He's made the book and the movie available for free. Watch The Great Taking. It's a small part of the workshop, but I highly recommend you watch it because there are a lot of people out there, particularly seniors, that think that their 401k is going to be their retirement plan, and they're about to become, part of this "you will own nothing" crowd sooner than they even have any idea.
So this touches like everything, FSAs, HSAs, things like anything that's a bank account or any kind of asset that you can own. It touches just everything.
It touches everything. And there are two components of it. But the first part, and again, I've been out warning people about CBDCs, and until recently, like doing the real due diligence of analyzing what all of the different CBDC pilots are, and then looking at technically how our existing system works, then I realized, no, we've already got a CBDC. They're just shifting the goalposts. They're already doing this. The FSAs and HSAs, that is the existing system. There is a bank called Optum Bank. They're the largest HSA provider in the country. They have 5 million customers. So it's a bank, and they program these debit cards to be able to restrict what you can buy, where you can buy it, and everything else. That's the existing system. There's no CBDC to be added. The functionality already exists, and they want to do it with everything else. They want to tokenize. So part of this is personal for me, because when I exited politics, I was passionate about tokenization, about digitally representing and being able to trade other assets, non-monetary assets, as a way to spread freedom. So that actually was where I focused my attention. And I spent some time working with a blockchain called Ravencoin, and I've tokenized and traded silver, art, wine, a whole bunch of other things, just kind of playing around with this. And most people, if you're in crypto, and you say tokens, they think, oh, NFTs are meme coins. And a lot of people will say, well, I don't see any need for tokenization. Once you understand that all of modern commerce today runs on centralized databases, all of it, think about it, your car title, your house title, everything you buy and sell, the actual record of it, and the basis of it is in some centralized database somewhere. Tokenization, and by the way, centralized databases are highly problematic. Again, everybody's getting hacked. So you're obviously it would be natural to want a better security model than centralized databases. And so then now you get into this realm of, okay, well, tokenization is a way to do that. But like everything else, tokenization can either have a freedom aspect or a tyranny aspect. And while people in crypto have been focusing on NFTs and meme coins, where you create something called hot dog and you drive the price to $1.50 because Costco still sells hot dogs for $1.50. That's what people in crypto have been working on. Behind the scenes, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York has been working with the 5 largest banks in New York, the Bank for International Settlements, DTC, and other groups to figure out how to tokenize all of the real world assets and do it in a way where it's centrally controlled and programmed. So when people say to me, well, I don't think this tokenization is going to mean anything, tokenization is a 100% guaranteed outcome. The only question now is who's doing the tokenization and who has the ownership of the tokens. So, but people are not aware of that, which is why I highly recommend. It's really a long article, but you will own nothing sooner than you think actually lays out everything that I just described, how databases work, how online click wrap agreements work, how different forms of tokenization works for money and for non-monetary assets. I try to lay it all out as one reference point so that people can once you read it, you should be aware of at this point, oh, wow, yeah, everything is a database, and we've got to decide which way this database is morphing moving forward. And you've got the Great Reset. We know what the agenda, I mean, they don't hide it. When people talk about, you'll own nothing or the Great Reset, these aren't this isn't propaganda or conspiracy theories. If you look at the WEF, the UN, Bank for International Settlements, IMF, and World Bank, they employ 65,000 people and have a combined annual budget of $35 billion. So the people that are pushing this, and those are just the front organizations, by the way, largely funded by taxpayers. So we're funding most of what I just described, $65 billion a year. But if you look at the WEF, they have over 1,000 partner companies. Just the top 10 WEF partner companies have a combined market cap of $9 trillion. They employ 6 million people, and they have $1.5 trillion of cash on hand. And these are the people that are pushing this agenda. These are the people that are pushing for technocracy, because at the end of it, it's the large multinational corporations that become the biggest beneficiaries of this, one world global system. So they're the ones that are actually kind of pushing this. So we have to be really aware of this, and we're not, because crypto is distracted on this project versus this project, and now people wanting the government to buy the surveillance Bitcoin and everything else. And so we are way off the mark. We're at the bottom of the 9th inning, and 99% of the people don't even know we're in a game.
The surveillance Bitcoin, that's civil asset forfeiture? Is that what that'd be called?
Yeah, so they proposed this Bitcoin Nashville event, and Trump went out and said, well, we're going to build a Bitcoin strategic reserve, and they're going to build it on the $200,000 Bitcoin that the federal government already has. Now, let me be clear. The federal government didn't buy Bitcoin on the open market. The federal government didn't mine Bitcoin. The 200,000 Bitcoin that the federal government has, they stole through civil asset forfeiture. Ian Freeman's Bitcoin, his 5 million or more, I don't know, is part of that strategic Bitcoin reserve. Ross Ulbricht's crypto is part of that. Other exchanges, Nick Fuentes, who just lost 13 point whatever Bitcoin, never charged with a crime. That is part of the proposed Bitcoin strategic reserve. Then on top of that, Cynthia Loomis, and I want to just, again, on the political side of this, people need to understand this. If Nancy Pelosi came up and said, spoke at a conference and said, guys, I want to spend $1 trillion worth of taxpayer money to buy my investment portfolio that I own personally and hold it for 20 years. Okay, if Nancy Pelosi did that, I think there'd probably be some outrage. That's exactly what Cynthia Lummis did with Bitcoin. She owns, I think, $500,000 worth of Bitcoin. And she has proposed that the United States government buys $1 trillion worth of Bitcoin over an extended period of time and holds it for 20 years. This is absolutely, it's beyond absurd. They're like Ayn Rand villains. Actually, that whole thing, to me, there's just a massive disconnect in my mind about people that got into crypto claiming to be libertarians and then supporting this, cheering BlackRock, cheering while we have $35 trillion in debt, my kids borrowing more money so my kids can buy their Bitcoin, which is a surveillance asset because, as we've already discussed, it can be tracked using chain analysis. It's been hijacked and it only does 7 transactions per second. Like it's beyond absurd what's going on with that.
Hey, Rob.
Yeah, I Stephen invited me tonight and has told me about the event in October, and I heard you speak. Janja Kellick on Epoch Times interviewed you and so forth, and I found it quite interesting. And I'm a lover of Epoch Times. I'm a lover of the Brownstone Institute and so forth, and a lot of different people, and read a lot of Substacks. So I'm going to plan, Lord willing, to come to your event, and I just had one. I mean, I got lots of questions, but this isn't the venue for it, I don't think. But if they've hijacked Bitcoin, why can't they hijack anything else?
Well, the answer is that they can, right? Anything can be hijacked. The Federal Reserve could be hijacked. I mean, arguably the existing systems could be hijacked. So I wouldn't want to ever make the claim that nothing could be hijacked. I will say there's actually a nuanced answer, but there are some things about Bitcoin that people have kind of made a religion out of. One is this: it's this idea that it's an open source project that didn't raise any money. So this is one of the big things that people will say is a selling feature of Bitcoin. Well, there's a problem with this. And the problem is that it turns out there aren't hundreds of developers working for free to develop code, and then hundreds of more developers for free looking at open source code and checking it for security flaws. It turns out that somebody has to get paid to do the development work. And so it's been turned into a religion that this open source thing is a great idea, not having funding. And that's how it got hijacked. It got hijacked because originally Bitcoin was coming along great. There was an organization called the Bitcoin Foundation that was formed with, I can't remember, Roger Ver was one of the first 5, and it grew to be a much larger organization. And you had the community chipping in to fund development. There were some issues that happened with that organization, and some people that were involved ended up facing some legal action, and I don't even know all the details, but what I do know is that around 2015, they were unable to continue funding the project. That's when MIT came in and took over the funding of the developers. And the MIT group that was doing this was chaired by a guy by the name of Joi Ito, Joiito. And it turns out that Joi, amongst other things, received funding from Jeffrey Epstein. He had to resign in disgrace when it turned out that he was investing Epstein money not only in MIT-related projects, but in his personal ventures. He started a venture capital firm to invest in blockchain technology, and I believe Epstein was involved in that as well. So this one guy, Ito, through MIT, funded the changes to Bitcoin to basically and make it slow and expensive while simultaneously funding all 3 US CBDC pilots. So I guess I would say, to answer your question, something could be hijacked, but I would learn from our mistakes, and I would look at projects and do due diligence on the projects. I mean, and I would take some of these items that have been turned into religion about how Bitcoin operated, and then rather than saying that these are things that should be worshipped, I look at these as things that should be mistakes that we should learn from. And as we look at different projects, and so anyway, that's the short answer. Now you can always fork off these projects, and you can always have competition, which is the point. But at the end of the day, it does involve knowing who the developers are, doing some research, and understanding how things work and what you're investing in. That you can't escape that. You can't avoid that. And by the way, other things can happen. You could have quantum computers, and now all of a sudden all this encryption could be broken. I mean, there's always risk with everything, and it's just kind of weighting what those risks are. And so what I will say from a ideological perspective, and this is so there are a lot of people in crypto that will say they're Bitcoin maximalists, meaning it's one coin only, which I always found to be weird, because these are supposed to be libertarian and things are supposed to be decentralized, and you're supposed to want competition. So the idea that there's only one crypto, I found conceptually weird, but nevertheless, that's a popular thing. When I look at these projects, I'm not saying I like Xano right now, I like Monero right now. Am I saying that these are the only coin that will ever exist? No, I'm not a maximalist. I'm not a maximalist with these coins today, and I'm conceptually not a maximalist, because I think that there are going to be changes in evolution, and I embrace that. I look forward to the competition, and that's what I spend my time reviewing and living on a day-to-day basis. But there's always risk, and I advise everybody to do their homework, and we'll say I do a lot of homework. When I get involved in projects, I actually get to know the developers. I'm not a great coder, but I at least do investigate how all of the stuff works conceptually, and try to get my hands dirty. And the thing that is the most fascinating about it is when I apply that same level of due diligence and analysis to the existing financial system. The big takeaway here that I started out with at the beginning is the existing system is digital, and it runs on databases that are not solid. So the existing system. So you've got to understand it. We're not making a decision here about whether we're going to have digital money. We already have digital money, and that digital money is already exposed, both technically, and then I would argue, given that fiat currency has a 0% success rate, it's fundamentally flawed in design, but it also has technical problems. So we need better technology, and there are some better technologies. And I encourage people to look at Monero, Xano, and somebody put in here Pirate Chain. I'm not opposed to Pirate Chain. In fact, at this point, I also haven't reviewed everything. So there's one other thing that I want to state about this. There are well over 20,000 different currencies. I have not investigated them all. It's always a work in progress. I'm looking for a combination of how many transactions per second can it handle, how much buying power is there represented in the market capitalization of these coins, and are they private, or what's the level of privacy and security of the projects. Yes, Greg says Zcash. Zcash is also a great project. And in fact, I have tiers of this. I like privacy by default first, meaning you don't have to take extra steps to make it private. But then there are other cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, Zcash, where you can enable relatively easily security and privacy. So it's a full approach. I'm not taking a maximalist approach, but what I am trying to do is get to a solution that is easy to use and can scale for mass market adoption for individuals and mass market adoption for merchants. That's my driving force.
But that all makes sense. I understand that, and I see that you're spending many hours a day investigating all this kind of stuff. And when it comes down to the normal Joe like me, who's still working to make a living and everything else, how can we? And I'm assuming your workshop will have a lot of points here to go in on this, but I don't have the time of day to to be trying to figure out what this, where should I put my money here and how should I put it there and everything else. And what do I do with my 401k and what do I do with my IRA and all these kind of things. I'm Stephen would tell you I like the idea of gold and silver. I to me, that's, at least it's tangible. And if I have it in my hands, it's, at least I've got something. So.
I'm for that. I used to be all crypto and now I'm balanced between crypto, gold, and silver. And I agree with that approach. And in fact, by the way, related to that, because I work with the guys at Alpine Gold and I was actually talking to them about, so the idea of creating a tokenized version of gold and Goldbacks using privacy tokens so that because right now I can use these Goldbacks. I can go to the barber, I can go wherever, pay with them in person. But if I wanted to buy something online, they have an online system, but it uses a centralized database and it can be tracked. So it's not the same level. It's not as fungible and private as actually holding on to the physical thing. But the physical thing doesn't do me any good if I'm trying to buy something from 2,000 miles away. So I see potential to merge the technical capabilities of like privacy tokens with precious metals, and in a way where you could actually have a hybrid. In fact, one thing that I'm thinking about for a point of sale system is where a merchant could imagine the merchant takes multiple cryptocurrencies, they take gold, gold tokens or whatever. It all gets converted to the currency of their choice. Let's say it's gold tokens. And then those gold tokens are put into an account, and they have what's called an NFC card, which is, it's not a credit card, but it's a credit card sized thing. It's for touch to pay. So imagine being able to go to a Goldback ATM and actually swipe your card or touch the ATM and pull physical gold out of a machine. So you've basically been able to take multiple forms of currency, have it convert to a digital form of gold, take the digital form of gold and actually take physical gold out of a machine. Those are the kinds of solutions that I'm interested in, because I agree with you. Right? We need all of it, but I will also say gold is not enough. And I've talked to those folks as well. There aren't enough Goldbacks in circulation. So there's an emergency and they go and, they go to ban cash, or they go to add the new digital level of basically imagine all of our money becomes an FSA or an HSA. That's probably the easiest way I can describe what's kind of next, is all of a sudden you wake up and everything is like an FSA. The government is determining not just healthcare products, but whatever you can buy, what food you can buy, how much gas you can buy, because they're trying to cut down on whatever. That's kind of the next evolution of that. When they push that out, then you want to be able to use whatever is available, and coming up with a way of making that easy to use with multiple assets is the way, because there isn't a single asset that has the ability to onboard people in an emergency, which is why I'm taking this approach of multiple assets, but defining what the criteria are and working to make tools that are easy for individuals and consumers. And yeah, people don't have time to look into this. People are too busy working every day, having their money inflated away by the Federal Reserve and by the government through excess spending. I mean, it's a tragedy what's going on right now. I mean, you go back and you look back in the 50s or the 60s where you could have one breadwinner, and you could have 3 or 4 kids, and the kids could go to college, all on one salary. Nobody can do that now. The dollar's lost almost 99% of its value since the Federal Reserve was formed. They're inflating it away, and people don't have time to look at it. And the unfortunate part of that is then when there's an emergency, people are going to wake up and it's like, they inflated away all of my money. My money's now worthless. And then they've taken all my 401ks and my investment vehicles, and they've done a whole bunch of legal maneuvering where I don't even own that either. But you have to be so busy just to keep up with inflation that you don't even have time to spend looking at alternatives. This is the challenge that we're facing with all of this. And this is part of why I'm doing these workshops.
So one other last question. So as you talk about the idea of going to an ATM with gold and so on and so forth, I mean, won't they control those things too? I mean, who's going to, if they're already controlling everything, then how can we as individuals be able to have access to those types of things? I mean, if they're, I can, if I've got the Amazon, thing that I can talk to and ask it questions, and it can listen in on my whatever thing I'm doing, just like my cell phone that I'm talking to you on right now. If they can do all that, why can't they control, all the ATMs or whatever the case may be?
Well, we're certainly not going to comply our way out of tyranny, and I think that there's a certain point at which we're going to have to make a decision. I think it's interesting that a country that was formed that engaged in a revolution over a 3-cent tax on tea, and now we're like, well, I don't want to do this because it might become illegal. And the truth is, at some point, we're going to have to make a decision. Are we going to comply with this or not? Which is why I've gotten to the point where, and I could go on a whole separate, I've spent 30 years close to politics. And my stepmother was actually the co-chair of the RNC, was Trump's ambassador to Costa Rica. I've seen the political process up and down. I've done a bunch of activism, and there's there's zero hope in the political process. And so at this point, it is about direct action, and it's about people taking direct control of their assets, which I could talk about that at length, about why there's not even a difference at the end of the day between the two major parties. Both are promoting the enhanced surveillance. They just have different ways of going about doing it. And so I don't know if you were here for this slide, but I had a slide. Right now, we're focused on the innovators. We're focused on the people that are already kind of radicalized by actions that they've already dealt with the federal government, whether it's the Amish, whether it's gun stores, gun manufacturers, people that were targeted by Operation Choke Point, people that woke up because of COVID tyranny. And by the way, there are tens of millions of these people. This is actually a completely different scenario than it was pre-2020. We're trying to find and aggregate those people and then build solutions so that when that emergency happens, we can offer the mainstream audience an actual solution that's been tested and refined and made easy to use, because they'll roll out in an emergency. We got the Patriot Act 45 days after 9/11. We got TARP 18 days after Lehman Brothers collapsed. And the CARES Act was passed on a voice vote 16 days after COVID was declared a pandemic, on a voice vote. On a voice vote. There are people in Congress that voted for all of those things, right? And it was all done in an emergency, and that's exactly what's going to happen. I will tell you what I'm again now calling enhanced central bank tyranny is going to come as a result of terrorism or a cyber attack. That'll actually get bipartisan support, but you could see the Republicans wanting to implement something like this on the basis of immigration. I can see we're not, these illegal immigrants aren't paying their fair share. We need to have digital money so that we can actually track this. And we have to tie this to a digital ID, which is tied to voting. There are two paths that get to this kind of enhanced tyranny state, but an emergency will get bipartisan support. And even the Republicans and the Democrats all seem to agree on this money laundering and terrorism. This always gets waived as a rationalization for increasing the surveillance state. This is why our pictures are taken 100 times a day. This is why we have the Bank Secrecy Act. This is why when you go to set up a bank account, you have to spend a half an hour. And they ask you all these personal questions. Oh, what do you like to do? And they ask you things about your personal life. They're not doing that to be friendly. They're doing it because it's part of a requirement for forms, for know your customer, and for anti-money laundering legislation. And both sides. I put this in the article that I just wrote because I talked to Ted Cruz when I ran for president. I talked to a bunch of the other presidential candidates and some of the people in Congress on this issue. Like I talked to Ted Cruz, who put in a bill. His bill was to make it so that the Federal Reserve wouldn't unilaterally pass a CBDC without congressional approval. And I'm like, and at the time when I talked to him about it, well, that sounds interesting. That sounds like a good idea. And then I researched it and I thought about it. And there are a couple things that came to mind. One, if it comes to issuing a whole new currency, the Federal Reserve theoretically doesn't have the right to do that. That's a congressional role anyway. So you don't need a bill to restate that. That's already an existing function. But then I actually got to think about, well, how clever is this? You have politicians claiming that the central banks are what we need to worry about. All of the surveillance and all of the programming and all of the negative aspects that we don't like about central bank digital currencies are passed by Congress. The banks aren't sitting there proactively pushing ways to track people. The Federal Reserve isn't sitting there saying, oh, gee, how can I add a new layer of compliance to our existing system. So now I'm not defending the central bank. The central bank shouldn't exist. It's a Ponzi scheme. And certainly these people would, commit genocide for an extra 5% return. So I'm not defending the central banks, but I am noticing that the politicians will try to act like in the case of Ted Cruz will give these quotes about how he is against CBDCs because it's enhanced financial surveillance. And then he reauthorized the Patriot Act, which added financial surveillance. So his words and his voting record don't even match. A lot of these politicians that speak against CBDCs because of surveillance actually voted for the things that are the surveillance. And the surveillance is in the existing system. There are national security letters. The government can come in. I know a guy, Ladar Levison, who I was friends with and I interviewed when I was with the Atlas Society. And he started a company, Lava Mail, I believe it was. I think he was Edward Snowden's email service provider. And he was approached by the federal government and he was given one of these national security letters. And what the national security letter means is we're going after you. We're pursuing action against you and you can't talk to anybody about it, including a lawyer. So I want to repeat this. They have a national security letter where they can come in, shut down your financial transactions or engage in whatever they're engaging in, and you can't even talk to a lawyer about it. So that's in today's system. Bank Secrecy Act, the Patriot Act, all of this today. So they want people to think, oh, these CBDCs are going to be better. How much worse is NSA bulk collection of your financial information and the IRS using AI with your bank, in addition to national security letters and everything else? How much worse does it get? And so I'm reframing this because people have no idea. We're like 95% of the way gone already, and people don't have a clue.
By the way, I grew up in New Hampshire. I was just up there, came back last night. So I live in New Jersey. So
what part of New Hampshire?
Lakes Region, little town called Samberton, exit 22 on 93.
Okay, sure. I know that area.
Yeah. I'm just amazed at how far gone New Hampshire has become.
You think we're far gone? I think we're one of the few places left, but
yeah, well, when I looked at all the political jargon and everything else, and I watched the people and so forth, it's not what it was. It's not. I grew up when Mel Thompson was governor, and what's his name ran the Manchester Union Leader. I mean, that's live free or die times. New Hampshire is, yeah. It's gone just as far as everybody else has gone. So,
well, yeah, the state legislature is okay, but yeah, we have a problem. Our federal candidates are bad, and we have a bad string of governors. But it's an ongoing struggle.
But the real problem is the people. We're and then I'd go one step further and say, look at Romans chapter 1, verses 18 to 32. That gives you the real picture. So anyway, I look forward to your October 5th and all that you'll say there. I like I said, I've got lots of questions, but this isn't the venue to do it in. So.
Okay.
Well, we plan on congregating at a diner, a small room in a diner afterwards with our group, whoever wants to join us, and you'll have plenty of opportunities, I believe, to ask questions.
Excellent. So anybody else have any topics they want to discuss or any questions?
And anyone that has a 401k that's under 59 years old or whatever the age is. So with the great taking that's coming, what are the options? Is that something that we want to discuss now, or is that something, what do people do?
Yeah. So, I mean, I can discuss it briefly now. And obviously you can now understand why it's a 4-hour workshop. I mean, the truth is it could probably be a 40-hour course. So I'm trying to like condense, I'm trying to do as much as I can to get the overview. And I might actually expand on a lot of this stuff, but I'm trying to get it. I mean, I don't want to give investment advice because, you know, we have this cartel called FINRA, which is a whole other story. But you can only give financial advice if you're part of this cartel called FINRA, and you license people to give financial advice. But you know, and by the way, they're indoctrinated. I actually know this. I looked at, because I was interested in tokenization, and I was looking at this idea of, well, how can we get rid of, you know, all of these third parties and create an online system where people can legally buy tokens in people's companies and everything else. And so I looked through the FINRA accreditation process in the system, and I'm like, I'm not going to touch this, but I'm very familiar with how it works. With that said, I mean, I can tell you what, you know, people close to me have done is they've exited, either exited the 401k entirely, depending upon their age, or borrowed. If they're not quite at 59 and a half, you can often borrow against your 401k. Depends on the rules with your employer. In some case, you can't if you're still employed. But I would encourage people first and foremost, because I can't do it as much justice as David Webb has. Google David Webb and The Great Taking, read his book and watch the video. It's a fairly short book, and I think it's an hour or so long documentary. And then after that, you know, do research on it. And if you come to the same conclusion that I've come to and others, I think you're going to decide you want to get out of your 401k. Now, as to what you get into, my personal belief is, and what I do, and no, I mean, I'm nuts. I mean, in terms of like on an extreme level of this, I mean, I used to live in a 6,000 square foot house. I consolidated everything down to 2 suitcases and have moved into self-custody assets because I view this as not in like a survivalist way. I actually see a more positive future with unlimited possibility, but I don't want to be weighed down. Where they get people is attachments to, you know, you've got medication, you have ties to the healthcare system. They have ways that they can, you know, take away your liberty slice by slice. So I'm like, look, I want to cut off all of that and go into self-custody assets. So I look at things like gold, silver, and crypto as things. And then there's other stuff that I can't, like the problem with some of this is I can't talk about it, and I'm not even sure what to do about that. Because there are, let me just say, there are interesting things being created right now where you can get domicile or residence in other places. You know, I'll give you one example. There's this, it's called Joseon, the Joseon Empire, Joseon. It used to actually be, it goes back to the 1300s. It was part of Korea, and it still has legal status as a cyber nation. And so I'm actually a denizen of Joseon. And so you can actually do some interest. You can incorporate there. It's tax-free. It has its own legal structure. And there are people that are working on things called like the network state. And so there are these ideas where you aggregate people together based on ideology, and then you actually go out and try to buy sovereignty. And so there are some things on the cutting edge that I'm experimenting with. I'm just not sure how much I should talk about it yet. And I will figure that out. But that's where I'm looking, because I will say I started out as a serial entrepreneur in 1995, and you know, I was like the entrepreneur guy. Like I was just the startup guy. That was always going to be my thing, was starting companies. And I wouldn't start a company in the United States there's nothing that would compel me to start a company in the United States right now. So now I'm looking at, which doesn't mean I don't like entrepreneurship, but I'm kind of, you know, this is a gulch kind of moment, or a go galt kind of moment where I don't want to participate in the system, because you're basically, it's kind of like using the dollar. You're by using the dollar, you're supporting war. By working within the existing structure, you're supporting and keeping that existing structure alive. And so I think there are a lot of alternatives that are going to emerge. And so, but I'm at the early stage of investigating those. So I wouldn't want to represent any kind of authority on that either, but maybe to plant the seeds to look at, Google the network state, Google Joseon, and start along those paths. But then also consider self-custody assets. I would be even worried about property. I will tell you, like, to me, so when you look at the energy credit situation, and I wish I had that slide, the UN branded MasterCard, What's actually going on behind the scenes now, and I've talked to legislators in different states, companies like BlackRock and others, they're going around and they're buying conservation land. They're buying forests. Why? Because the global currency moving forward is going to be carbon credits, and they're getting an advance run on carbon credits, knowing that that's going to be the future currency. But as that relates to land, if you look at, just as one example, the UN pandemic treaty that they're trying to put together. A lot of this is about giving up national sovereignty to these international organizations. And they've stated very clearly that they could use a climate emergency as a public health threat. So I would be worried even about property in terms of it being taken through eminent domain through a climate emergency based on some kind of carbon credit thing. And the more you study that whole side of things, it actually, there's some weight to that idea. And I recommend a guy by the name of Patrick Wood, who has written extensively on technocracy for like 40 years. He's actually been tracking these organizations and writing about this. So I'm even a little skeptical about land. But again, all of this is to say that I think if enough of us adopt these alternate currencies and we get enough momentum, then we can actually stop. We need to stop technocracy, because at the end of the day, their plans are, they don't value individual rights. They don't value property rights. They don't even value free will. They've explicitly stated that. This is a top-down command and control situation. So you can't go off and hide in the woods and coexist alongside this. They want to tokenize and own all of the assets, the land, the air, the sea, and everything in between. And so we actually need to stop it. The way to stop it is to get enough people to not comply and to start using alternatives, because they need they need high levels of compliance in order to even have a shot to get their thing to sustain.
So this issue pretty much covers medical freedom, Second Amendment, free speech. It's an all-encompassing freedom issue that's coming our way with this CBDC.
It is, to me, it's the gateway to tyranny. Once they can program and control your money, they can control your behavior. So no matter what your issue is, homeschooling, if you're homeschooling your kids, we're going to shut off access to your money. If you actually go to the Brownstone Institute and look up my name, the first article that I wrote, it's actually the first chapter in my book. And the first chapter of my book is a kind of a science fiction story of what the world might look like in 2032 based on the UN Sustainable Development Goals as elements of a social credit system and an energy credit based digital currency. That is what they're trying to build. I mean, and you see these things. I will tell you, it's horrifying. It's part of me. I go back and forth on this. There's a part of me that wants to go deep on researching more of these rabbit holes, and then there's another part of me that says it actually doesn't even matter how much more I know about how bad this is, because at no point does more information lead to, this is a benevolent outcome, right? It's always worse. I mean, you'll investigate something like the MAID program in Canada, where all of a sudden it's like now they're euthanizing. The pleasant way of saying, they went from killing 10,000 people a year to 13,000 people a year. And now if you're depressed because you can't find a girlfriend, or if it's somebody that has special needs, now you don't even have to go through any kind of approval process. And it's just, every dystopian aspect of a social credit system and surveillance is going on in the world. And they're all trending in a way that is not compatible with liberty or individual rights. So I get torn between going deeper on that and then realizing it doesn't matter. We need a solution. So it's how much do people need to know about how bad this is going to be before they start pursuing alternatives? It's a constant juggling act. But I do not think we have a lot of time. And it's kind of like, again, once you start understanding how the existing banking system works, I mean, it's mind-boggling how it works technically. And once you realize that we're already this deep, particularly the part about surveillance, just how much we're already being surveilled, or even how programmable it already is. When you really think about HSAs and what they're doing with that MasterCard and energy credits, it's already completely. So I'll talk to people that'll say, that'll never happen here. That's only in China. Or if that happens, it's going to be 10 years from now. And I'm, after examining this, I'm like, no, this actually happened 10 years ago. So there's this balance between like, how do you wake people up? We're so far gone but people want to deny how far gone we are. So it's trying to find that fine line. But yes, in my opinion, programmable digital currency is the gateway to all of this. And it's the linchpin to it. And likewise, if people can engage in voluntary trade, if you can engage without needing their system, if you can just trade whatever you want, including information, by the way, that's one of the things that you can do with this blockchain technology. Encrypted blockchain technologies, you can actually also exchange information. So it is a way to get around censorship. Money is speech, but you can actually use these technologies to convey information as well. And so as long as people can engage in trade and share information outside of essentially controlled system, then we've still got a shot and we've still got freedom. So I'm actually, as down as a lot of this sounds, I'm more optimistic about the future because we've been living on borrowed time in kind of a delusional state of, non-free. We don't have freedom to the extent that we think we do anyway. The Bill of Rights has been gone since 9/11, if not before.
Well, the one good thing about your articles that on the Brownstone Institute is that if you're driving in your car and you don't want to spend the time to actually read everything, you can just press play, and it's on audio also. So you can listen to all Aaron's articles if you go to Brownstone.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's a great point. And they are long, but they're long intentionally because I want to lay out the whole case because I have so many people come at it from different angles. But once you look at the whole picture, it's like, okay, yeah, this is what this is. And so now accept it, lament over what you thought it was, and then let's talk about building a solution. I'm seeing here in the comments, what we really need more than anything is a free market and capital. I couldn't agree more. Like that's actually, again, doing startup stuff. That my whole thing is I had like 180 shareholders in my first company, and then had to start dealing with VCs and I saw how capital markets work, and I'm like, this is just completely backwards, and it's only gotten worse since the mid 90s. I mean, now it's harder for small businesses to get access to small investors. The legal requirements and burdens are higher. There's more of a requirement. Only wealthy people can invest in companies unless it's really narrowly defined. But now people have to show proof of assets. The whole thing is absurd, and it's done not to protect investors. It's done to protect the existing incumbent players. And just as a small side note, over 50% of venture capital funding comes from taxpayer sources, whether it's pension funds or university endowments. And so I actually call them venture socialists. And by the way, it explains part of why technology is so woke and why it's based on the West Coast, because it's not what you think it is. It's the largest single investor in all venture funds in the United States is the California pension fund system. That is the largest single investor across all of venture capital. And that is probably surprising to a lot of people. Let me see if there's any. I'm just checking to see if there are any other comments in here. They moved their own goalposts. Inflation in 1980 is not measured the same as it is today. That's true. That's very true. Shadow Stats, that's a great site, by the way. Shadowstats.com. Check that out. And I think that I think Brownstone is doing some work on this as well. The inflation numbers are completely fraudulent. And we are not even remotely comparing apples to apples. So they take out all of the things that don't actually increase in price. It's a very clever trick. 80% of the population failed the Milgram experiment. That's true. That's also true. And which is, again, why I say this. It's liberating when you do this. When you realize that you're just focusing on the innovators, when you're just focusing on the 2.5%, and in doing so, trying to innovate and create solutions, then you don't worry so much about the noise from the mainstream. And it's not that the mainstream is bad. And I'm not going to go into this. Oh, these people NPCs or anything like that. Actually, I look at it more as it's a function of incredible indoctrination, and there's a reason why things are the way they are. But with that said, even America itself was, 1% getting to 3% and the 3% getting to 15%, and that was enough to win the revolution. But there's this quote by a guy named Dr. Charles Tart: when an audience is presented with a theory that is one level above their understanding, they find it inspiring. When the information is 2 levels above their comprehension, they fall asleep. At 3 levels, they become angry. And when the data reaches 4 levels above the level of the audience, they want to kill the presenter. This is actually my favorite quote because, one, it ties directly with like the adoption curve, going from innovators to early adopters to early majority. But it also is true. If I went on to MSNBC right now and said they're not going to give me 2 hours, so let's say I condensed to 90 seconds, whatever I could convey about what I'm saying here in 90 seconds, there are people that would want to kill me watching that, or they would be very angry about this because we've delved into so many areas that are for, like, people don't know how money works. They don't know how, like, and so it wouldn't, me even getting that airtime would not help our cause. I would be spending more time dealing with trolls or death threats, right? So understanding that, my goal is not MSNBC. I don't want to be even on Fox News. I want to go after the innovators are going to be in these health freedom groups, food freedom groups, Second Amendment groups. In fact, I'll pull up the list of categories. This is so anti-CBDC advocacy groups, sound money advocates and people involved with precious metals, libertarian groups, decentralized technology groups, free market economic freedom groups, anti-globalist organizations, privacy advocacy groups, constitutional rights groups, gold and silver enthusiasts, free speech advocacy groups, health freedom organizations, gun owners associations and Second Amendment rights, grassroots political organizations, local business networks, energy independence groups, off-grid living communities, alternate media, and patriot groups, right? So these are segments that we can work with, and it's better to focus on. And by the way, this might not be complete. I keep on doing research on this. I keep on trying to like narrow it down to 20. If you've got any other ideas, please let me know. At some point, I'll share this around in some format. But I kind of want to. We're putting together an advisory board, and Dan is on the advisory. He's our first member of the advisory board, representing the libertarian group side of this. And I want to recruit 19 other people in each of these areas, so that they can help us understand how health freedom works. What are the politics of that group? What are the challenges? What are the major, events every year? How do we navigate through that community? How do we get all these communities working together to focus on this issue? Because this digital programmable money affects all of these groups, whether they know it or not. If you are for health freedom and vaccine choice, nothing will kill vaccine choice faster than money that can be shut off if you don't comply, right? And you can say the same with each one of these groups. There's a similar type of story. So once you just focus on the 2.5%, you don't have to worry about, I don't care if people are mad. I'm not even trying to get mainstream adoption. I don't even want it. In fact, at this point, I'm kind of like, okay, I'd like to fly somewhat under the radar of that. Let's focus on where we know people are already awake and ready for this. And then together we build a solution that's easy enough to use so that the people will adopt it because it's the easier, better, faster solution. That's how you get to the mainstream adoption. And we don't have that now. If we went out right now trying to push mass adoption, even, I love the workshop, and every time we do a workshop, I improve because I'm trying to make it easier for people, but it's not as easy as it needs to be to get tens of millions of people using this. It's good enough to get early adopters, and actually to get those early adopters to provide feedback as part of the process of building a better product. So anyway, that's my rant on that.
In the past, you used to be able to go to bitcoin.com and pull up all the stores and vendors and places that you can buy and sell. And I tried to do that recently, and it didn't seem like there's that many compared to what there was a few years ago.
That's true. And in fact, that's even true in New Hampshire. There were more retailers and shops, restaurants taking crypto directly in 2016 than there are now. And part of this is, so a lot of times the way a business would get signed up is somebody who's really passionate about a particular cryptocurrency, Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash or whatever it is, will go to a small business owner, and then the small business owner will say, oh yeah, I'd like to take this. This sounds cool. And then they'll set up a wallet on their phone, and they'll get a little pin on a virtual map, and then no one ever comes back and buys anything. So the problem with this is there needs to be a point of sale system for the merchant that's easy to use, that takes multiple different cryptos and gold and silver, but that you can actually train an employee to use. This needs to be something that's easy to use as a system for a business, not a kind of a one-off. And so what's happened is there have certainly been point of sale systems, and BitPay was one of the largest. And I went to BitPay, and they're not accepting new merchants. And part of the problem is, if it's a company, it's a central point of failure. So if all of a sudden the government decides, well, we don't want people to use these point of sale services, we're just going to shut down this company, and now all of these businesses aren't able to use this. There was a point of sale system here in New Hampshire called AnyPay, which was a great system, and I know the guys that created it. But when Ian Freeman was raided by the FBI, I think the FBI came and knocked on their door too, and they didn't apparently have a warrant, so they left. So that's done. But their point of sale system was now not being supported. So a lot of businesses that were using this system now don't have the system. So in my opinion, the single biggest problem that we have for crypto adoption for day-to-day transactions is a point of sale system. And a point of sale system needs to take multiple assets, but it also needs to be done in an open source way so that it's not controlled by a corporation that can be shut down by the government. It needs to be an open source, freely available point of sale system. So that to me is important for this. Now, we do have some time, but we don't have a lot of time. But that's a critical element to this. These things have to be easy to use. And so when I investigate how the existing system works, part of it is investigating how CBDCs work, or at least how they conceive of CBDCs. And there's some things that people say to me that I want to convey, because they're misunderstood. So they're investing a lot in this. You don't have to have a computer to use a CBDC. I'll give you an example. Right now, welfare and EBT cards are basically, they're debit cards, right? They're like an FSA, they're like an HSA. So right now we can use welfare. The government distributes welfare programs using these digital money cards. I mean, because that's, again, the EBT is no different than an FSA or an HSA. Well, you could do the same thing with CBDCs. You could have an NFC, a tap to pay card. So somebody doesn't have to have an internet connection. They don't have to have a wallet. And when you explore what these governments are doing, what these governments are doing, but what these central banks in conjunction with tech are doing in the WEF and others, as they're piloting things, they're working on solutions for this. They did a CBDC project in Nigeria, and it wasn't very successful at all. And a lot of people said to me, see, this shows that people don't want CBDCs. We can push back. And I talked to some people in Nigeria, and then I researched what it was all about. And so first of all, only 45% of the people in Nigeria even have internet access. So even the idea of rolling out a CBDC in Nigeria doesn't make a lot of sense to begin with. So then why did they do it? Well, they did it because the IMF and the World Bank came in, just like they do in developing nations everywhere, and they use the carrot and the stick to say, well, unless you try this, we're going to pull this money, or we'll give you more money if you do try this system. But the reason that the World Bank and the IMF wanted to try this is, for them, this is a test. So and this is a problem that liberty activists have. I know this from a lot of the liberty activism in the Free State. This is time and time again what happens. You expose some government corruption, and you never reverse the government corruption. A win is when you don't get thrown in jail for exposing the corruption. That is usually what gets defined as a win, right? And then you can't really sustain this. But then they don't stop what they're doing. It doesn't stop their corruption, and they keep on moving on. They have a plan to implement a global system where all assets, including money and non-monetary assets, are on one system that can be centrally controlled. If something doesn't work, it's an opportunity to collect more information. So by testing Nigeria, it's also a way to test how you might address rural West Virginia, How do you target populations where there's limited internet access? It's just another data point. And so what I found is, I mean, everything from using these cards so that people don't actually have to have a wallet, or still having cash alongside of CBDCs, but where the cash is just a paper representation of a token in a database, or even turning post offices essentially into banks as places where people can use this digital money. They're working on all of these things. They're building out CBDCs so that people that are visually impaired can use it. They're building out systems so that everybody can use it. And this is the thing that we really have to focus on and understand. So much of crypto has been about, oh, well, I'm so much smarter than you. You can't set up a Lightning node. Oh, you don't know how to do 3 steps. You can't code your own privacy into your coin. Oh, you're an idiot. And again, I wish, instead of having that kind of an attitude, I wish we had the same passion around, this is money. Everybody should be able to use it. I want grandma to be able to have private money and not have to know anything about computers. If we had the same passion about making things easy and about separating money and state and stopping the boom and bust cycle of nations that happens from fiat currency and stopping the warfare state and the welfare state, if we had that same passion about building crypto and alternative asset user interfaces, we'd already be ahead. So much of the problems that we're dealing with, the good news and bad news is these are all solvable problems. This is just reallocating attention. We can work together. We have the capacity to design products and services that work. We just have to shift our attention and our focus and get out of the IQ contest and move more into making things that work for people. And if we do that, then it's still possible. But the bad news is we haven't done that, and I don't think people are aware. I'll give you another example on this. So when I first got Bitcoin in 2012 at Liberty Forum, it was better, faster, cheaper money than I'd ever used before. Running an internet company and credit card transactions, at that point in time, Bitcoin was a fraction of a cent. And it took it was instant, relatively instant. And there was nothing like that in the traditional financial system. And that was 2012. But since then, big tech and finance have built things like Venmo and Zelle and Google Pay and Apple Pay. And now we're going to have X payments through Elon Musk. So they've built all of these other things. But people in Bitcoin are still at 7 transactions per second, trying to rationalize that it's digital gold and not digital cash, and implementing things like Lightning Network that don't work and are complicated. Well, we're not going to win in the marketplace if we don't actually build better products. And now people are focused on, well, we don't even need to do that. They'll just take, digital gold, and they'll back all currencies will be backed by our digital gold, and just a whole series of lies and things that people are telling themselves. And it's a great distraction from not building and not innovating. So, but we can innovate. I hope we can get enough enthusiasm. And so part of what I'm doing, so we're doing the workshops, but I mentioned some of these other conferences I'm going to. I'm going to the Bitcoin Cash thing in Argentina. I'm going to the Monero thing in Mexico City, hopefully, and Acapulco. I'm going to these other conferences because I'm trying to rally folks together to see if we can get, multiple cryptocurrencies to work together to say, yeah, we need a combined solution. And this is why I like Cake Wallet. The CEO Vic of Cake Wallet is 100% on board. He's ideologically on board. So I don't. By the way, I don't even want to build these things. So I put out a I will build these things. But I actually don't have a lot of time to, there's a lot of stuff. We don't have a lot of time. And so I think communicating this and bringing all the people together, if I had to also run, trying to build an organization to build this, that's not ideal. If I can find other people to do it, that's my preference. But one way or another, we're going to have to build it. And so far the reaction has been good. You're seeing, I don't know if anybody else is seeing this. I mean, Bitcoin maxis are Bitcoin maxis, but I'm seeing people that are more open and talking to each other. People in the privacy coin space that are interacting with each other. Monerotopia is going to be a bunch of different privacy projects. Even PorkFest here in New Hampshire, people were using different privacy coins. People are talking to each other. People are working on things, collaborating on things. Once you realize the existential threat that we're facing, this isn't just about whether your coin is going to be the best one or not. This is about whether all of crypto exists. This is about whether or not you're going to be able to use precious metals at all. And unlike any other time in human history, because people will say, they'll throw out all these, economic or monetary theories, good money chases out bad and everything else. All of that isn't even entirely true in the past, but it's completely different in the surveillance state. It's completely different when you have digital money that can be controlled and programmed, and when you have a surveillance state to back it up. We've never had monetary policy in that kind of environment. And so a lot of people are clinging to old economic theories, and we're in a different realm, and we've got to acknowledge that as well. But I am encouraged, and I do think we can accomplish this. I am sick of my friends and people that I like and respect getting thrown in prison and being targeted by the federal government. I mean, that hasn't stopped. I mean, what happened to Ian? What happened to Roger? What happened to the CEO of Telegram? I mean, these aren't one-off instances. 4 months ago, not many of these people were in jail. Now you have Tornado Cash. Now you have, like, somebody actually sent out a Google spreadsheet a week or so ago of all of the people that are in prison for related to crypto projects, none of which had anything to do with any violent crime at all. And that list grows by the day. So part of it for me is when I look at what's happening to Roger, like, we have to all step up, because they're actually smart enough to know. So Ian Freeman introduced Roger to Bitcoin in 2010, and then Roger and Ian both, but Roger introduced just huge, more people to Bitcoin from 2010 to 2015 probably than anyone. So interesting that those two guys are either in prison or in a situation where they're unable to talk and facing prison sentences. These guys are smart enough to know when COVID happened. I don't know, this is a little side tangent, but FTX, so Sam Bankman-Fried, his girlfriend, Caroline, whatever her name is, his girlfriend's father worked at MIT doing population health. His whole goal is to come up with strategies for getting increased adoption for vaccine uptakes. These people look at this from a population health perspective. They look at who are the influencers, where are you going to get, pandemic spread in a certain way, right? Who's patient zero? Well, in the same way with who's patient zero in terms of being an influencer to convince people to take the vaccine. Well, they've apparently taken that approach, and they've analyzed cryptocurrency and crypto adoption. And if you were going to say who are two of the people that are the most effective at promoting the liberty argument for cryptocurrencies, it's Ian and Roger. So some people will say, and I just got a DM from somebody that's like, well, I don't know if I want to talk about this because Roger's got a battle with the DOJ. We should be doubling down on this. This is not a time, if there's that statement, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. Well, I mean, we're at the fight stage, and a lot of people are like, well, we're at the fight stage, I'm going to go ahead and take my ball and go home. This is not the time to take the ball and go home. This is the time to double down, triple down, because I look at it as the default is technocracy. We're not going back to pre-COVID. We have $35 trillion in debt. Most of our financial system's a Ponzi scheme. We have horrible population demographics. Our children have been indoctrinated. We don't have good population statistics. I think the whole thing you don't unwind a pyramid scheme. So the default, a Ponzi scheme, the default is global technocracy, because that's where the money is being invested, and that's where things have been pushed for decades. So if that's the default, I'm not worried about the repercussions of fighting this, because the default is we're all enslaved. So now is the time to fight. And I just hope we can get more people. I do focus, if you do follow me on social media, sometimes I get carried away about the Bitcoin maxi thing, and it's not carried away. It's because it is such a distraction now. The whole mindset of it now is buy this thing and then don't ever sell it, and then hope that BlackRock and governments buy the thing. That's not how you stop digital programmable currency and the surveillance state. That's not a solution. Think about how great that is. It's great in activity, right? We need to be innovating, not sitting around talking about $58,000 is the price of the coin or whatever it happens to be. So anyway, we're getting off topic, but this stuff to me is really important. And so Roman Storm is also in the crosshairs. That is a great point. Tornado Cash dev. And I think he needs to raise some more money. He's raised some money. The legal fees are millions of dollars for this stuff, by the way. And so all of these people should be defended. These are people that, again, money is speech, and these people have been completely on the up and up, and they need to be supported. So I'm going to support all of these guys, and even more so the people that not only promoted liberty, but have been effective at it. I mean, these are the people that need to be. We can't let it have a chilling effect. We can't let this targeting have a chilling effect on the adoption of these alternative currencies, and that's what they want. So we have to reverse. We have to reverse this. So. Anything else? Nobody? So I hope, well, I hope, so I was talking to Dan earlier. I definitely have been shadow banned. We're up to, I think we're up to 442 viewers now. I mean, it was more than twice that last week. And I think this one was more promoted. And so my X reach has been crushed by like 80%. But I hope this was helpful. And what I'm going to do with this is take clips out of it. Oh, I just got a tip, a $5 tip using Monero through this tipping service, which that's called xmrchat.com. So I actually encourage you to take a look at XMR Chat. It's a really interesting thing that you can configure, and then people can just tip you through this website. And then it pops up in your feed that they've tipped you along with a message. And this message is super excited to have you joining us at the Monerotopia conference in November in Mexico City. So anyway, there's a cool example of privacy tech in action. So anyway, I'm going to chop these up into clips, but I do hope if you are listening to this live, the early bird discount ends in about an hour and 45 minutes. So NJ or bit.ly, bit.ly/NJCBDC. And that will get you to the page and pass it along to anyone that you know. And remember, we do have a hotel block as well. So if you want to travel to this, I know I've gotten some people that have said they'd travel 400 miles for these workshops. We'll see if that pans out or not. But would love to have you there. It's going to be an absolutely great event. I mean, Dan and the team actually put together this great event in DC called Enemies of the State. Which was it wasn't associated with, but it went alongside the Libertarian National Party. And it was a terrific event, honoring, Julian Assange, Snowden, Ross Ulbricht, Ian Freeman, and Roger Ver. And it was an incredible event. So I know this one is going to be awesome as well, because we had even more time to plan it. So, I'm looking forward to it. The workshop will be intense, but it'll also be a great opportunity to meet incredible people. Everybody that I've met through this New Jersey group has been wonderful. So you should come out just for that, if nothing else.
Yeah, we got a good crew in New Jersey, and the Philly crew is coming out too. And really hope that everyone comes out. We get a chance to meet each other and network. And this event is going to be special, and the after party is going to be pretty good too. I got a couple tricks up our sleeve, and we're going to make some announcements in the next week or two, but we just can't do that right now yet.
Awesome. I can't wait. I know it'll be good.
Hey, I just want to say thanks a lot for having me on the call, and this intimate context here. It was great to really just listen to you share all the knowledge base you have in your head right now. I'm sure there's a lot more where that came from, and I really look forward to the event and the networking and learning more and learning how to teach other people like I've been taught. So
excellent. Well, thank you, and I'm looking forward to it as well. I've got at least 4 hours worth of material. All right. Anybody else? Let me see if we've got. Well, actually, one more thing. Let me do this. I always forget. I want to show you the daylight. So this is a very small team. Again, it's the core team doing all of this is me, my wife part-time, and my friend George, who I've known for 30 years and worked on a whole bunch of things with. And so to pull this off, there's a lot of things that we're trying to kind of automate. And so I encourage you to go to the daylightfreedom.org site. And this is where you can fill out information. So if you're interested in hosting an event, you can click on Empower, and there's a form there. In the Empower form where you can indicate your email, phone number, location, how far you're willing to travel, whether you're interested in attending, hosting, or sponsoring the event, whether you're interested in person or online. This is how we determine the locations for events. So all of this goes into a system so that we can actually kind of analyze. So if you look at, well, why are the cities that are the 15 or so cities that we have listed, why are those the cities? Those are the cities because that's where people have indicated they have interest. And so, and if you're like really passionate about this, the other thing that's helpful, this is all grassroots. This is always, and just as the case as well, somebody, is affiliated with the Elks Club and was able to bring that in as a venue. The event we did in San Jose, it was the Calvary Church, which was the church that defied the lockdown orders in California and was fined millions of dollars. And so somebody was affiliated with that. This is all about passion and where people have interest. So if somebody comes forward, we pick the dates and prioritize this all on where there's interest and passion. So if you're like, oh, I really wish this could come here, and I know this perfect venue, that would be great. And this is not a high end, like exclusive resort type of situation. The goal is to be able to educate as many people as we can. So for instance, the pricing on the tickets is like it's $75 to $105, and then there are discounts if you come in through one of the sponsors. But but part of this is we're providing a book, we're providing crypto, we're providing actual gold. Like this just covers our cost because we have to travel there, stay there, get the venue. So we're looking to find venues that are reasonably priced that can accommodate a lot of people, and free is great as well. I mean, if there's somebody watching this that actually has a venue and they're like, oh, this would be great, you can use my venue, come on down, fill out the form. We'd love to see that. And then just spread the word. If you think your friends or family would be interested, point them to the site as well. This is the best way for us to stay on top. The website also goes into build. This is the area that talks about the wallet and the point of sale system. So for now, we're set on the wallet. But if you're watching this and you're a dev, or if you've got expertise, or if you're somebody that actually has a point of sale system and you'd like to work on this, reach out. And then the other thing is, all of this has been word of mouth. So there's no marketing budget. So I just checked the other day, probably well over 60 interviews on various podcasts, and all of it has come from word of mouth. There's been absolutely no outbound marketing effort at all. I mean, we might do a little bit of that just in terms of actually reaching out to people. But the thing that 100% works the best is if there's a podcast that you think that is a fit for this, if you contact them and if you say, hey, listen, I really think that you should have Aaron Day on to talk about CBDCs and this digital tyranny and all of this other stuff, that's worth 100 emails from me saying, hey, I'd like to be on your show. If somebody that actually watches the show says, I think this should happen, that works. That actually is the most effective way of doing it. So if you're willing, I would definitely appreciate that. And again, we're looking for those innovators. So I'm more excited about somebody that's got a Second Amendment rights podcast, or somebody that has a food freedom podcast. That is worth more to me than a generic podcast with an audience that this is going to be lost on. So don't think that any audience is too small. I've been on podcasts where they have like 50 or 100 people, but it turns out that the people running the podcast themselves are passionate about it, and now they want to host one of the events. I mean, those are the innovators. And so so all help is appreciated. This is 100% grassroots, and it's going great because of people like Dan and Steven. I think it's actually been a wonderful thing to work on, and we're just really trying to scale it up. But yeah, WBRT. Yep. Thank you, Greg. And I've been on WBRT, and I've got a standing, or I think it's a standing invitation. I've been on a couple of times, and I actually will continue to go on. This is Is there a link to that, by the way? I never know where to go to actually promote this. It's a great podcast. I think it's World Blockchain. I'm going to mess this up, but anyway, it's actually a great group. They pick a topic every week. We've talked about AI and blockchain. We've talked about tokenization of assets, a whole variety of different things. And they've been doing this for a while. And it's like a group of anywhere from three to five folks on there. So I chime in on that roundtable. There you go. World Blockchain Roundtable. So I look forward to popping on that as well. And with that, I guess if there are no other questions, I guess we'll wrap it up. But I appreciate everybody's time and hope you can make the New Jersey event. And if not, others in the future. Have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.